What's up, everyone? I am Wink.
And I am Skillz.
And this is Scream Cheese. Today we are talking about the new slasher classic, Founders Day, directed by Eric Bloomquist and starring Naomi Grace, Devin Druid, and William Russ. A small town is shaken by a series of ominous killings in the days leading up to a heated mayoral election. Before we get into the review, if you love horror as much as Skillz and I do, definitely subscribe to our channel. We would really appreciate your support. Skillz, when I mentioned that I was going to be watching Founders Day, somebody at work told me that they felt like that was just a ripoff of that Thanksgiving movie that came out. And I feel like this is kind of like a poor man's Thanksgiving. What did you think about this film?
So that film actually came to my mind right away. I don't know if it's a poor man's because honestly, I wasn't crazy about that Thanksgiving film.
I feel the same way, but I guess poor man's was not the word. It's just, it feels like it is like similar.
It felt very similar. And I'm not saying this is a great film, but I might have liked this more. This film to me was very competently made and I enjoyed it for what it was, but it's definitely a movie we've seen a million times before, you know, a Scream ripoff. I think the team behind the film did a really great job executing the script. And the script wasn't bad, it just wasn't original. The relationship between the characters wasn't very strong or fleshed out enough for me to really care who lived or died. It was the kind of film where as I'm watching it, I went into it with low expectations and I enjoyed it the whole way through. It was shot very nice. Like the DP did a great job. I thought it looked really good. It was a very competently done film. It was a well done film. I think the team behind it, because I know like the director and the writer, they're brothers, I'm assuming, because they have the same last name. So I definitely think they have a future in horror films. I just think they need a better script. This isn't a bad film, but if they want to make a great film, you have to look at films like Scream, for example. A script where we really care about the characters. And it always comes down to that with any movie. But for a horror film, so often we don't get that. We get one-note characters, and a lot of times it's enough and it works. But when you're kind of retreading a familiar story, the one thing you can add to it, sure, you can put a twist on it, like this has like a political aspect to it or whatever. But the one thing you can do, you can tell a story that's been told before, but if you have really good characters that are grounded and the dynamic between them is really good and you get really involved in them emotionally, you can tell that same story again and it's going to feel kind of new and fresh. Obviously, this was lacking that to me. They had beats in place, but again, when it was all said and done, I kind of didn't really care. It was a fun ride, but once it was over with, I just kind of moved on with my life. So what were your thoughts on this film, Wink?
I kind of echo your sentiment. I wasn't completely blown away by this film. It was kind of a weird mashup of like a political thriller and a slasher. I feel like we could make a genre called like the generic stupid mask slasher genre, you know, where it's like, not to say their mask is necessarily stupid, though it kind of is a little bit. But like every one of these films, they're like, they know what they're doing. They're making like this slasher and they're like, let's get a mask that you know, hides who the killer is or whatever. And it's like, how many, dude, could you imagine 50 years from now what kind of stupid masks they're going to be wearing? One of the biggest shortcomings of this film, I thought, was the script. It's not the worst in the world, but I think it's worse than you're even letting on. I think that the dialogue is not so great. I think the acting doesn't come off wonderfully, but I think it's because of the script mainly. You said at one point you didn't care who lived or died. The characters didn't seem to either. So like in the writing, like no one seemed affected by the deaths that were actually happening. And if they were affected, it was like in a really weird way. I will say that it got better for me. In the first half, or even the first 75% of the movie, I was like, I don't know if I know what's going on, and I don't know if the writers do either, but they did manage to tie it up at the end. I don't know how logically realistic this could have been, but it did make sense, and it like came together just enough to be like a satisfying ending, and actually enough for me to redeem the film. So like through most of the film, I'm like, man, they messed up. This is garbage, no good. And by the end, I was like, okay, you did know where you were going, and like, okay, I can follow that. One thing I wanted to point out, they have this like stylistic kind of montagey music sequence sequence in the middle of the film that feels maybe a little bit out of place, but it reminded me of a similar thing in Donnie Darko. And while it feels a little out of place, I think it actually served the film. I think it did what they wanted it to do. I think their music choices were actually good, whoever picked like the soundtrack. And I think that their little music sequence did like at least get me more in the mood for that film. But in the end, not super impressed. Totally glad to watch it. It was another like cookie cutter kind of generic slasher. You were saying if the character relationships were better and stuff, you can kind of do this thing over. I would even say you can do a Scream ripoff. And if you genuinely embody the youth of the time you're in, that might be enough. I don't know that they did that here, though.
I don't want to crap on the team behind this because I feel like this was really well done. I would like to see another film from this writer-director team. Again, I think they're brothers.
Yeah, I think it says like on the cover, the Bloomquist brothers or something.
Okay, I see a lot of potential here. When I was watching it, I was totally enjoying it the whole time. So it's not a film where you're like sitting there and you're totally bored and you're just waiting. It wasn't that kind of film. It moves along at a brisk pace. There was a couple of little moments where I'm like, oh, I'm surprised that you revealed that so soon. Or there's parts where it kept me guessing, but by the time it got towards the end, I already knew pretty much, well, I knew who the killer was. I didn't know the full extent of the plan or anything, but you know. But anyway, so my score for this film, I'm going to have to give it a 5. And I think, again, there's aspects of this film that I can give a much higher score, but overall as a film, story-wise, I'm going to have to give it a 5. But if you're bored and at home, I think you could do a lot worse. But it's nothing original. So
yeah, I would agree with that. Man, you would feel like the way that you've talked about this film versus the way I've talked about it, it feels like the scores are almost flipped. I'm going to give it a 6.4. I think this is like not a very good movie, but if you're going to watch a generic slasher, this is a fun one to watch. And there are lots of choices of generic slashers, and there's a lot of them that are worse than this. So yeah, 6.4, worth checking out if you're into that genre. Let us know what you thought of Founders Day, and also let us know of any other horror movies you think we need to check out. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you next time. Peace out, cheesers.
peace.